From the New York Times, I'm Ross Flatt. Welcome to today's webinar, the New York Times Summer Reading Contest. As we always say, there are just as many ways to read the Times as there are Times readers. Whether you start with the front page to check out our latest headlines, or scan the sports section to follow your favorite athletes, debate the latest opinion pieces, or if you're like me who use NYT Cooking to get dinner on the table, the Times has something for everyone. And that's the spirit of our summer reading contest, to connect students' interests and voice to the New York Times. Now, if you are a teacher who tries to weave both voice and choice into your assignments, this webinar will show you how this contest can do just that. Today, we'll be joined by three guests who can give us a unique point of view about this contest. We'll be joined by Catherine Schulten, editor at the Learning Network here at the New York Times. Karen Gold, chair of the English department at the Governor's Academy in Byfield, Massachusetts. She's run this contest with her students. And one of those students is joining us today, Eric Berard, class of 2021 at the Governor's Academy. We'll be meeting all of them in just a minute, but first, let's see what we're talking to them about today. So first up, we will show you how to participate in our summer reading contest and why you might want to participate. We'll then take you through how to find teen-friendly reading pieces over the summer that teens would be interested in and get their attention. We'll then talk about how to write rich reading responses to use to enter this contest. And finally, we'll give you tips on how to bring the contest to your students. So let's begin. Now, as always, we're going to start today's webinar with a quick write. So what we'd like you to do is, in the group chat, take a minute to answer this question. What is your favorite section to read in the newspaper? Any newspaper, it doesn't have to be the Times, but it can be. And what is one recent news piece that has stuck with you? So again, what is your favorite section to read in the newspaper? And what is one recent news piece that has stuck with you? So again, take 1 minute and we'll check back in. Okay, so we have a lot of really great responses. A lot of people talked about COVID-19 updates. Obviously, that's something really big that many people are concerned about. One person talked about how they have been looking at the data pieces around COVID-19. Michelle talked about how she loves the cooking section and the recipes that are in there. Annie also likes the food section. There's a piece written by the owner of Prune on closing her restaurant that was really haunting. So not just for recipes, you really kind of get that personal piece as well. There's other folks who visit for pieces around Sunday's article about how teachers should take it easier on middle school students during distance learning. I really like that. Somebody talked about reading National Geographic magazine to learn a little bit more about bees that are coming into this country. So there is a lot. And as I'm talking, people are continuing to write, and there's tons of ideas here. So one thing that we can see from these comments is that, again, there is something out there for everybody. It might be media that you take a look at. It might be photos. It might be infographics. It just might be pieces that you enjoy reading on a regular basis. That's really what this contest is all about, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to ask our first guest, Catherine Schulten from the New York Times Learning Network, to join me.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, welcome, Catherine.
Hello, Ross. Thank you.
So, Catherine, I'm just going to ask, you've been at the Learning Network for a while, so you know a lot about the summer reading contest. Could you tell us a little bit more about it and what folks can expect?
I can. This is our oldest contest. It's been running since 2010, and it is probably our simplest contest because all you have to do is essentially what you just did in the chat box. You just have to find something that interests you and tell us why. And it's really just an invitation to teenagers to see if the paper's relevant to them and how. A lot of kids might just think of the New York Times as front page news, Trump, the coronavirus, whatever. But there's so much more, and I hope you'll see that by the end of this webinar. I'm going to go quickly through the rules because you've probably participated in other summer reading endeavors. This one's a little different. It's really simple. It runs for 10 weeks. Every week it's the same. We post a question on our site. What got your attention in the Times this week? And then you have 300 words or fewer, that's not very many, to tell us about a piece that interested you for any reason at all and tell us why. And every year we invite the Times newsroom to act as judges, and people from every section join in. We have science reporters, politics reporters, whoever's interested, and they read the work of students. So talk about writing for an authentic audience. Your work's going to be read no matter when you post it by somebody in our newsroom. And then we pick favorites every week. And we always choose one main winner, but we also choose, depending on how many we get that week, 30 to 50 additional winners. So many kids over the course of the summer get their work called out by name. We publish it. It's an easy way to kind of engage with the Times. And a lot of kids tell us later that it started them on a newspaper reading habit for life. Maybe not necessarily ours, but in general. This year, kids can pick anything they want that's published in the Times in 2019 or 2020. You might think we just mean articles, but in fact, that includes photos, videos. The Times has a number of podcasts now. Infographics, essays, op-eds. We use a lot of illustrations these days. They're GIFs. There's anything at all that's in the Times that gets your attention is legit, and you just have to tell us why it interested you. You can participate any of the 10 weeks, or you can participate all 10 weeks. And it's open to anybody who's 13 to 19 years old, but you must be in middle or high school. So there are some 19-year-olds in college, and we ask you not to participate. We're asking just high school and middle school.
All right. So thank you, Catherine. And Catherine's going to be joining us throughout the rest of this webinar. What we're going to do over the course of today's webinar is we're going to play for you 3 student responses that we're using as mentor texts. So for those of you who have never used a mentor text before, it's really just an example that a student can use to copy writer's moves, to really get a good model and a good idea about what it is that we're looking for here. So let's first take a look at the very first article that we're going to hear. This is from an article called "Everyone Has an Accent," and this was a student who was a summer reading contest winner based on her work on this article. So as you listen, we would like you to respond in the group chat. What writer's moves in this piece would you want your students to emulate in their writing? And if you're a student participating, what writer's moves in this piece do you think you want to emulate when you're writing? So let's take about a minute and a half and listen in, and then we'll come back.
Everyone has an accent. Lisa Mishra of Princeton, New Jersey. My mother came to the U.S. not only with the desire to give me a better future, but also with a heavy Indian accent. It's the accent that made me who I am today, the accent that helped me with my math homework and comforted me when I cried. For me, it's perfect. As I grew up, though, I noticed smirks and giggles following my mother's speech. I remember seeing an online ad that offered courses to get rid of your Indian accent today, feel like a better American. Knowing that there were courses designed to help people get rid of their accents suddenly made my mom's pronunciation seem embarrassing. The hierarchy for accents became apparent at school, too. Dull English sentences were transformed into something hilarious when said in a non-native accent. As students burst out laughing, I'd wear my unaccented English like a shield and say, "Oh, I don't talk like that, so I'm not offended." I lie, though. Even if I don't talk like that, My family does. This article not only put into words what has been a daily struggle for me, but also gave me the strength to fight it. As the author puts it, no one speaks without an accent. So I shouldn't be embarrassed of the one that raised me. The Indian accent will always be a part of my family identity, and I wouldn't change that for anything, not even if it would make me feel like a better American.
Okay, so please feel free to continue to add your thoughts. But as I'm reading your thoughts that are, again, coming in really fast, there's a lot of really great observations here. One person is talking about the student's vulnerability in this essay. Another person is talking about personal connections to the material and the lessons that she learned here. Renata talked about making the invisible visible here. I really like that observation. Saran talked about just writing about the simplicity of something that she knows about. And I think that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about here. So, Catherine, I'm going to bring this over to you. Is there anything that you would like to share based on what we just heard and read?
So many of you are saying the thing that made me choose this to be the first piece we'd hear, and that is the personal connection. I think kids may come to the New York Times fresh from school writing, thinking that the word I has no place in their writing. And in fact, this contest is all about the I. It wouldn't exist except for the I. It's all about, why do you connect with something in the paper? And so I wanted to put this one first because it's so very personal. But I also want to point out, a lot of you are writing how you're impressed by how vulnerable she is. Yes, a ton of kids every summer seem very willing to tell us real things about their lives, and we love it. I mean, they make themselves vulnerable in service of explaining what they're learning. But I also want to say, especially to students listening, that is not the only way to do it. Yes, it's extremely important to make a personal connection, but there's lots of kids who make a personal connection by just saying, I've been to summer camp my whole life, and this piece on summer camp really spoke to me for that reason. You don't have to tell us your darkest secrets. On the other hand, you can be as vulnerable as you like. So thanks, Russ.
All right. So now that you guys all had a chance to kind of see what we're looking for here, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit more about the benefits of the summer reading contest. So I'm actually going to ask for Karen and for Eric to join us now.
Hi, Ross.
Hey, Karen, how are you?
I'm
Hello.
Great, thank you.
So Karen, I'm going to start with you. So how long have you been doing this contest with your students?
We are going into our third year doing this, and I'm excited. I love it.
That's great. And so what is it about this contest that you love so much? Why do you have your students participate in it?
Well, first and foremost, it's interesting, right? I think the kids enjoy it, and I, as a teacher, enjoy reading their responses and what they choose. Like most high school English departments, kids have a choice of novels to read over the summer. But my department also wanted us to give kids the opportunity to keep reading good nonfiction, to have a weekly writing opportunity. Right. Those are skills that sometimes they don't do at all over the summer, and to continue to practice their critical thinking skills, building their vocabulary. And we've had really a great response from it.
Yeah. What kind of feedback have you received? Let's start with students. How do your students enjoy this contest?
Well, I think they enjoy it, and they're surprised by it because they're given so much choice, right? I'm not, as their teacher, directing them or telling them what to read. In fact, I haven't met or worked with most of the students that I will teach. So this is assigned to rising juniors, kids I'm going to have in class. And so I think they like to know they can choose something that's interesting to them, just as some of, from cooking to sports to politics to whatever appeals to them. And I think they also like joining in the community that is the summer reading contest, posting their work, seeing it published. Who doesn't want to be published in the New York Times, right? And also reading what other kids have to say. It's something that's a lot of the feedback that I got from kids. And I think they were surprised at how much they actually enjoyed it.
That's great. And I guess with surprises, I just want to ask you: was there anything that you were surprised that, like any unexpected benefits to this contest that you didn't think of beforehand?
Sure. I think I get great feedback from families that, teenagers aren't always the most talkative young people with their parents or their grandparents. And so they couldn't help but say at dinner, at a family gathering, it was a great thing to talk about what they had read. And so it became almost like this family or multi-generational event that they talked to grandpa or their parents in the car about what they had read. And so the parents caught on, they knew what the kids were doing. So it became a great source of conversation. For me as a teacher, it gave me a little bit of introduction to who they are before I got to know them by what they selected.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. So you're not just looking at it for, how well they write or how well they're keeping up on current events or if they can submit work to you, but it really gives you a great understanding of just who they are as people. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
All right. So Eric, Karen and I were just talking about what students are getting out of this and how they enjoyed it. But we have a student right here. So I'd love to hear from you. Could you tell us just a little bit about your thoughts on the contest? So when did you participate in it and how was it for you?
I enjoyed the challenge overall. I started the contest during the summer between my sophomore and junior year. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things in the news that I've never read up on before. So let me ask you this. When you first started the contest, you started the contest in the beginning of the summer, right? And it took you through the end. So going into the summer, what was the type of article or piece that you found yourself drawn to? And then did that change throughout the summer? Yeah. So initially I started off with topics like science fiction and like space travel. So I was reading a lot of stuff about like the International Space Station and just stuff about NASA. And as the summer progressed, I started getting more interested in stuff related to like politics. So I started reading a lot more about the Trump administration and what they were doing. So.
Okay. And was did it affect how you approached the news? How were you did you read the Times or did you read the news or pay attention to the news before this project? Did that change at all towards the end? I'm really curious.
This contest definitely like sparked my interest in the news. Before this contest, I don't think I watched the news or read the news as much. But after this contest, I was spending a lot more time in my own free time, just reading up on stuff and staying in the loop.
That's really neat. So I was a teacher for a while myself, Eric, and I would give students summer assignments, and I've never had like a whole classroom of students be like, yes, summer assignment. So I'm curious, like what was there anything different about this assignment? How did you, what was it like to go through it as an assignment?
Yeah. So, like a lot of other summer assignments, it wasn't just like a book that was assigned to us to read, which was huge. It was nice. And I felt like I had a lot more freedom in choosing what I wanted to read or write about and give my opinion of. So that definitely made the experience a lot more enjoyable.
That's great. All right. So what I want to do now, thank you, Eric and Karen. I'm gonna ask you all to stay on because what we're gonna do now is we're gonna look a little bit more about how to find those teen-friendly pieces. So finding pieces that students who are watching that you might be interested in, and what we'll do to start is we are going to listen to another summer reading contest winner. So again, folks, as you read along and listen, please respond in the group chat. What writer's moves in this piece would you want your students to emulate in their writing?
Why is it so hard to get a great bagel in California? Kelly Song. Spinach hummus, grass-fed beef, soy lattes. This is how the world pictures San Francisco, a city of vegan-loving, gluten-free, high-maintenance maniacs. And now our bagels, still young and innocent, are being attacked. As a San Francisco high school student, I feel compelled to respond. Yes, I admit, New Yorkers left us in the dust on this one. The glorious, good old New York bagel. How could anyone compete? It's beautiful and magnificent, even low-key majestic, if you will. And we deserve every ounce of criticism for a sad excuse of a bagel. But there is no reason to assume San Francisco is in any way spoiled or pretentious simply because it is lacking in the bagel department. While our little circular friends may not be up to par, we're not all that bad. We have a killer slow drip and a hella, get it? Good sourdough. We are California, so undeniably hipster and techie, yet so desperately needed in this burrito-deprived world. My point is, there's room in the food world for two. Yes, we do like our pizza thin-crusted, but that doesn't necessarily make us monsters. We're all just a bunch of foodies, living on the same earth and breathing the same air, doing the same wine-tasting tribal call. And just because my bagel isn't perfect doesn't necessarily make me a sore loser. So, let's end this food war, shall we? Please accept this In-N-Out burger as a peace offering. Take it. Really, there's no need to be ashamed.
Okay. So I have to say, full disclosure, this is a very hot topic in my household. I'm from New Jersey. I live in New Jersey. My wife is from California. So, I mean, all I had to do was show her this article, and it was almost war in our household. So I am interested to see what folks are saying here. A lot of people talked about the humor and how funny this article was, and the word choice that the student is using. One person said it doesn't just have comedic elements, but there's some sarcasm in there. Another person talked about how the sarcasm itself was funny. It wasn't biting. And another person, and a lot of other people just talked about how playful this article was, how personal it was, and how it really sort of, another person talked about how it took the essence of San Francisco into the writing. So not only did you kind of get this funny article that you're reading, but you really sort of understood maybe where the student was coming from. All right. So Eric, I was watching this, but I could also see that you laughed a little bit at this. So was there anything about this article that really struck you?
Yeah, there are a couple dingers for me. One was when she was like, and just because my bagel isn't perfect doesn't necessarily make me a sore loser. That really got me. I like the sarcasm there, and just, you know, it's kind of like a zinger. So
that's really funny. Karen, how about you?
I love the adolescent voice in it. Right. It sounds like many of the teenagers that I teach. And so it's funny, it's smart, walks that fine line of snarky. And I think that's one of the things I also really like about this is that kids are practicing their own voice. And I think that writer has just that right touch that's funny and smart. And I've got to say, I love the opening lines with the spinach hummus, grass-fed beef, and soy lattes. Have a little heart around that. So love it.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's great. All right. So what I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to invite Catherine to join us again. And Catherine,
hi guys.
So hello again. So we talked a little bit about, why you want to do this contest, what the benefits are, but could you tell us a little bit more about finding those pieces to write? What's available for people?
Yeah, I will say the fun of this contest, both for kids, but honestly for us judges, is like we have no idea what kids are going to pick or what they're going to say. And it's so unpredictable, and it's such a range every year. The Times publishes over 1,000 pieces a week. And as we've already pointed out, you're not just restricted to, articles. You could pick a photo. In fact, kids have won in the past writing about photos. You could pick a podcast, whatever. So there are many, many ways into the Times, and it's exciting to see kids pick them. Kids who don't know our contests may come to the Times thinking like, oh, I have to pick something of grave global importance. That's not the case at all, as you'll see. Genuinely, anything they want to write about is fine. So I want to show just some previous winners from last year alone, so you can see the many, many topics that they've included. So kids wrote last summer about Nicki Minaj and Beyonce. Kids write a ton about pop culture. Of course, they write about fashion and sports. As many of you said, that was the first place you go to the paper too. A lot of kids pick things that I'd put under the category of news you can use. So they'll pick things about, standardized testing or how to succeed in college, or even like, workout tips from the health section or that kind of thing, summer jobs. Other kids just pick stuff that is fascinating to them, and it can be the tiniest niche. So like last year, a student won writing about hummingbird beaks, and she watches hummingbirds in her backyard every day, and she learned something from a Science Times article that she had no idea about. Kids every year are very attached to articles that are about social justice, and that's something we love to see, and that's something our judges comment on every year, that kids often are writing about race, gender, class, incarceration issues. Last summer was the summer of the Hong Kong protests, and that was youth-driven, so there was lots of interest there. I will say about politics, as we head into the 2020 election season, every year we get tons and tons on politics, and we are thrilled when kids push back, when they say, I read this opinion piece, I totally disagreed. Now, they have to be civil about it, of course, but we love a real engagement. Kids come at us directly sometimes and talk about our reporting and what's missing. That's fascinating. That's great. More of that. And lastly, I'll say we have a post called 21 Things Teenagers Can Do with the New York Times Subscription. It's a quick way in to introduce them to stuff like the cooking section, the games section, health section, like all kinds of stuff they may not know exists that is perfectly legit for this contest.
And so let's talk a little bit more about the writing. So we talked about selecting an article, selecting pieces that you're interested in. Let's get more into the writing rich responses section. So we're going to play one more article for you. And again, we're going to ask that you read along as we listen to this final winner. And again, as you listen, respond in the group chat. What writer's moves in this piece would you want your students to emulate in their writing? So here is our final piece.
The rich are planning to leave this wretched planet. Brian Ham, Seoul, South Korea. What could possibly motivate someone to wear a 100-pound suit with diapers and drink tubes, rotate senselessly in centrifuge, induce claustrophobia and risk death, all while coughing up $55 million in the process? The answer is right above us: space. For me, space is so alluring because it turns fears into works of art. Despite my thalassophobia, I still find myself attracted to the vast nothingness, the impossible emptiness of the skies. When I'm playing football at sunset on a cloudless night and look up at the infinite sky, I don't feel distress or panic, even though I realize that I'm just a trivial speck of dust in the galaxy. Philippe Stark, designer of our project aimed to launch millionaires into space, describes it as a first approach to infinity. Spending a split nanosecond in the blackness will result in instant death. And yet there's just something so cozy about drifting in a spaceship with dangers all around, but not within. The same coziness one feels snuggling under a blanket while a thunderstorm wages war on the world. All of this is why the article, "The Rich Are Planning to Leave This Wretched Planet," attracted me so much. Reading about how my seemingly impossible fantasies could come true was surprisingly relaxing and satisfying. I just have a small problem with the title. Space travel shouldn't be about escaping a miserable world. It should be about discovering and rejoicing in a new one.
Okay. So thank you for everybody who's been sharing the writer's moves that they really enjoyed. We have a lot of great comments here. One person talked about the curiosity that the writer had, that allowed her, that really drove her response. Another person, a few people talked about the imagery, the sentence structure, the use of adverbs here, personal understanding behind space. Really, really powerful stuff. So Karen, I'm sure you had your teacher hat on as you were listening to that. Anything that really captured your eye as you were watching this?
I think I would echo what a lot of people are saying. There's just some beautiful imagery, that is language rich. And again, I think we're seeing the writer's passion, right? If he wasn't into space before, he certainly is now. And it's great. I loved it. Love the opening.
Great.
Love that opening question.
So I'd actually love to kind of continue with that line of thought and just think about, I'd love to get from you, Karen, what are you looking for in your student responses? So putting aside the contest itself, when your students are responding to this and you're taking a look, what is it that you're looking for?
I'm looking for clarity. Can I understand what my young writer is talking about? Concise. That's one of the benefits for me. I'm always pushing my juniors to select a strong, word choice and choose carefully, because there's a 300 word limit. And so is it concise? Is it clear? Here's a thought. Is it interesting? I love to read interesting reading and responses. And again, I think a personal connection. Why did I choose that? This obviously the previous writer chose it because he was so interested in space. And I love that part of it, that connection to the article and what was most interesting about it to the student.
That's great. Eric, so you engaged in this contest. You talked about how the articles that you were interested in changed over the summer. Did you notice anything about your own writing and how that changed?
Yeah, going off what Mrs. Gold said, I noticed, like, coming back the following year to Govs, my writing also became a little bit more concise, but I also go down the rabbit hole sometimes, and that's something I've always been trying to work on.
Can you just tell me a little bit more about, without maybe going down the rabbit hole? What do you mean when you say going down the rabbit hole?
When you go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, there's so many topics that you're interested in that you can't focus in and just explain one specific thing.
So and this really forces you. It really forces you to do that. It's a really nice constraint. So, Catherine, let's bring this over to you. We've talked about what teachers are looking for, what's a challenge for students, what students learn from this. Do you sort of have what's really the secret sauce to writing a response that both the judges are interested in and that makes for good reading?
Oh, I've got the secret sauce. Let me tell you. We have a thing on our site. Everything I'm about to say is coming from that. And there's a lot more detail than I'm even going to give you here. But we do a whole post called Mentor Text for every contest we run now, where we take previous winners and we look at how they won. What did they do that was so great? And if you're a teacher or student out there thinking like, whoa, those were amazing responses, I'm not sure, my kids can write those. This is just a little help that breaks them down. So the first one is what we've all said throughout this: make a personal connection. And all three of these have done that, but the mentor text piece that you'll get the link to actually breaks down how the kid did it and invites other students to follow that structure. And essentially, you may have even noticed this as you read Lisa Mishra's piece and just now Brian Ham's piece. They give context at the beginning about who they are and why they care, and then they devote the last two paragraphs to saying how that particular way and what jumped out at the article because of it. It's a very easy structure to follow. Our second tip, read critically and show your thinking. All right. Every teacher who's on this webinar knows the problem of asking for a reading response and essentially getting something like, I like cooking. This article was about cooking, so that's why I liked it, right? So this one kind of, it shows students how to go a little deeper into that. And it invites them to really tell us the story of what happened to you as you read. So if reading is all about engagement with a text, what was going on in your mind? What happened emotionally? Did it make you mad? Did it raise questions for you? Did it comfort you? Did it push you in terms of, or challenge you in some way? Were you making connections to other stuff, either things about your own life or other things you've read or other items in the news as you read? Just kind of what happened and why. The third tip, reference specific details or quotes. As you may have noticed in Brian Ham's piece just now, he was weaving in details from the article he was referencing throughout. And if you've read the first piece, you know that. He talks about the $55 million, the diapers. He uses a quote from the piece. And it's all so deftly done, you don't even realize it. But we all know, and every summer we get a whole raft of student entries where they essentially find an article on skateboarding or whatever it is they care about, and then they never speak of the article again. It's just an excuse to tell a skateboarding story, which that would be fine for another contest, but this is about reading response, so we need to know that you read it. And then the last tip is about voice, and everybody's talking about voice in all three of these pieces. I think kids come to our contests really practiced in more academic writing, where you're not using the word I, you're not ever using slang, for God's sakes. You're not breaking it kind of rules that would allow you to have, let's say, one sentence paragraphs or maybe 2-word sentences like the beginning of that bagel piece. We want them to realize they can write exactly as they speak in this contest. Another winner last year who's a good example of this was writing about a piece in the style section about punctuation. And the kid experimented with crazy punctuation in their entire response, which was delightful for us to read, that somebody would have fun like that. And that's kind of the palpable feeling of some of these responses, that the writer is having a good time, and therefore so are we.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And, one thing I was thinking about in that last point is it's summer vacation for conventional writing in a lot of ways, which I think is really cool. All right. So we talked about finding an article. We talked about, writing something really powerful. But I think the question that a lot of people who are here have is, okay, how do I do this? So Karen, help us out here. How do you implement the contest in your own classroom?
Sure. So the way that we do it is that we're setting a 6-article minimum for this summer. And we ask each student to share a Google Doc with his or her teacher and to keep a record throughout the summer of the article, chance to properly cite it, and then to put a copy of their comment on it. So then come September, there are 6 to 10 articles and paragraphs essentially that the student has submitted. So one of the things I really like is it's a great opener the first week of school when you're trying to figure out who they are. It's great to ask a few of them, hey, what was your favorite article? What did you find most interesting? One of the things I will say that I really noticed is that, that frequency of writing, and I actually saw increased sophistication with their writing as they progressed through the contest. So we share Google Docs and then we talk about it that first week. And it's been pretty successful that way.
That's great. And, I think we touched on this a little bit, but, it's a summer reading contest, but the Times is more than just summer reading. So I'm sure you have students of all different abilities and backgrounds. Is it just about, finding a great editorial piece or, any other article?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest selling points for me is this is a contest that any kid can do. I'm not teaching advanced placement English right here, right? I think this is great for any high school student, second language learners. As Catherine mentioned earlier, there are podcasts, there are graphs, great photography, and so for kids to respond to that, that's valid and that's interesting, right? So lots of choices, and kids are good again if they're writing or reading something that's interesting to them. I would contend they write better and more effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to know. Any other tips or final logistics that you think teachers might need to know?
I think, I think every teacher or every department will find kind of what works for them. This was not particularly sophisticated, but I think that it did work sharing documents that way. I just want to add to that one of the coolest things is this becomes a global community for kids, right? This is not just New England, which is where we are. It's not just the United States. There are kids writing from different parts of the world. And that was, I think, really fun for my students to see just how broad it was and all those different opinions and students doing this all over the world. So I think that was a fun component for them and for me.
All right. So Catherine, before we wrap things up, are there any other final tips or things that teachers and students should know about the contest itself?
One question that comes up constantly is, how do I prove to the teacher that I did this? So there are several ways you can do this. First of all, anytime a kid sends in a comment to our site, they're going to get an email back. They can save those and forward them to you at the end of the summer or however you'd like them to manage that. So that's their proof that they posted it. Some teachers also have their kids take screenshots as they post and again, save those. And then Karen does this smart thing where they all post it in a Google Doc, both the article and the piece, and that puts it on the student. And then it's an easy place to read. So that's the tip I want to leave you with, I guess, is that very practical tip.
Yeah. All right. So thank you. And finally, Eric, we'll give you the last word here. So you've done this. This is old hat to you. Any pieces of advice for students who are approaching this contest?
So I really enjoyed the contest overall. I think one of the things I enjoyed most about it was, like Ms. Gold was saying, there's so many people from different places in the world, and I really enjoyed seeing other people's responses. And besides that, another thing I really enjoyed about this contest was just like the freedom I had in it, and I didn't feel confined to write about any specific topic. So just that freedom and having like my own response was really nice. So
that's great. Yeah, really, really embrace that freedom. So first, I'm going to thank Catherine, Karen, and Eric for joining us today. So thank you very much. Your insight was incredibly welcome, and I hope the students and teachers who joined us today really got a lot out of it. I'm sure they did. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
thank you.
Thanks. It's fun.
And for myself, Ross Flatt, Rachel Manley, and everyone here at the Learning Network, thank you for attending, and we'll see you next time. Take care.